According to the New York Times, the bubble burst and the lie dried up. That's the mood in Silicon Valley, along with a bit of confusion and quite a bit of paranoia. Founder Christopher Kircher lied to investors about the company's business performance and used the money raised to buy a $16 million private jet. Not only has funding dried up for startups that burned through tons of cash in the past year, but today the word fraud is also in the air as investors take a closer look at startups, and the tech downturn has completely disappeared. The famous saying, fake it till you make it. Aaron Griffith from New York Times reports, here's what happened in the last 2 weeks. Charlie Javis, the founder of financial aid startup Frank, was arrested on charges of falsifying customer data. A court has found Rishi Shah, co-founder of advertising software startup Outcome Health, guilty of defrauding customers and investors, and a judge ordered Elizabeth Holmes, the founder who defrauded investors in rapid blood test startup Theranos, to begin serving an 11-year prison sentence she was sentenced to on April 27. And these developments follow the arrest in February of Carlos Watson, the founder of Aussie Media, and Charles Kirshner, the creator of the software company Slink, both accused of defrauding investors. Indeed, in the coming weeks, May that is, the fraud trial of Manish Lashwani, co-founder of software startup Headspin, and Sam-Bankman-Fried, founder of cryptocurrency exchange FTX, who will face 13 fraud charges later this year, are expected. Overall, the indictments, convictions, and sentences have created a sense that the fast and loose falsification by the startup world has real consequences. Despite this generation's many high-profile scandals, Uber and WeWork, and meltdowns, Juicero, few startup founders other than Holmes have faced criminal charges for overstepping the bounds of so-called business bloat, which now appears to changes. The funding downturn may be to blame. Unethical behavior can be largely overlooked when times are good, as they were for the tech startups in the 2010s. Between 2012 and 21, funding to tech startups in the United States increased eightfold to $344 billion, according to PitchBook, which tracks startups. More than 1,200 of them are considered unicorns, worth $1 billion or more, at least on paper. But when the easy money dries up, everyone parrots Warren Buffett's adage to find out who swims naked when the tide goes out. After FTX filed for bankruptcy in November, Brian Chesky, Airbnb's chief executive, renewed the aforementioned adage for millennial tech founders. He tweeted, "It's like we were in a nightclub and the lights just came on." In the past, venture capitalists backing startups were reluctant to pursue legal action when defrauded. The companies were small, with few assets, and going after a manager would damage the reputation of the investors. But that has now changed as unicorns have soared, attracting billions in funding, and larger, more traditional investors, including hedge funds, corporation investors, and mutual funds, have entered the investment game. There's more money at stake, so it just changes the thinking and approach, says Alexander Dyke, a University of Toronto economics professor who specializes in corporate governance. The U.S. Department of Justice is also urging prosecutors to be bold in prosecuting more business fraudsters, including founders and executives of private startups. So the recent prosecutions of the founder of Frank, Aussie Media, Slink, and Headspin leave high expectations for more to come. Already, IRL, a messaging app that investors valued at $1 billion, is being investigated by the Securities and Exchange Commission for allegedly misleading investors about its user numbers, according to reports from The Information. Ruby, a clothing delivery startup in Ohio, allegedly fabricated a financial success story in order to secure funding, which its founder used to buy the $1.7 million home, according to a lawsuit filed by one of the investors. News outlets have also reported unethical behavior at startups including Olive, a $4 billion healthcare software startup, and Nate, an e-commerce startup that claims to use artificial intelligence. An Olive spokeswoman said the company disputes and denies the reported allegations. All of this creates an awkward moment for venture capitalists as well. When startup valuations were soaring, they were seen as visionaries who created kings. It was easy enough to convince investors, to contribute to their funds, pension funds and universities and wealthy individuals, and that they were responsible for fund managers with the unique skills required to predict the future and find the next Steve Jobs or create him. But as more startup scams were uncovered, these market titans now play a different role in lawsuits, bankruptcies, and court testimony. They play the defrauded victim. Venture capitalists say this type of investment is one of the riskiest areas to put money into, but it offers the potential for bigger rewards. The startup world celebrated failure, and if it does not score some small, big failures, it's considered that it has not taken enough risks. But it's unclear whether that excuse will hold as the scandals become increasingly humiliating for all involved. Investors are increasingly looking to advertise like RHR International to help spot signs of so-called Machiavellian narcissists who are more likely to commit fraud, says Eden Abraham's partner at the firm. They want to strengthen the protocols around how they evaluate startup founders, Abraham says. We've had a series of events that have caused concern. Startups have many characteristics that might be associated with fraud, Dyke says. They tend to use new business models, their founders often have limited control, and their backers don't always enforce strict oversight. It's a situation that's ripe for bending the rules when a recession knocks on the door. It's no wonder we're seeing a lot of fraud committed over the last 18 months coming to light right now, he says. When Miss Javis was trying to sell her startup Frank to JP Chase, she told an employee not to share exactly how many people were using the service, according to a complaint to the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. She later asked the same employee to create thousands of accounts, assuring her staff that such a move was legal and that no one could end up in orange jail uniforms, the complaint said. After JP Morgan bought the startup for $175 million in 2021, Frank's investors were quick to take a congratulatory victory lap on Twitter. More students and families will now have greater access to financial aid and higher opportunities, wrote Reach Capital Investor. It's so exciting to know that you will now have an even bigger platform to make a positive impact on so many people's lives, was the praise from an executive at Chegg, which invested. Javis now faces 4 counts of fraud. Last week, JP Morgan accused her of funneling money to a shell company after the bank uncovered her alleged fraud. Outcome Health, which sold drug ads displayed on screens in doctors' offices, raised $488 million from investors including Goldman Sachs, Google-linked fund Capital G, and the family of Governor J.P. Pritzker of Illinois, while making public announcements of breakneck growth and profitability. In reality, the company had missed its revenue targets, was struggling to manage its debt, and was overcharging its customers. However, investors raised money and even allowed Outcome Health co-founder Shah and Shraddha Agarwal to cash out $225 million worth of stock. One of the company's small investors, Todd Cousins of Leerink Partners, said he was not put off by various red flags like missing revenue targets and other details because they could easily mess with them, or so he thought. Eventually, the company's fraud was exposed when other exec sales reports, which would be difficult for outsiders to detect, he says. This was a great business model and the product was working, but these founders got really greedy, he says. They wanted more. Cousins' company lost 90% of its $15 million investment. Shah was convicted of 19 counts of fraud and Agarwal of 15. A spokesman for Shah said he was deeply saddened by the verdict and planned to appeal. Agarwal's lawyer said they were reviewing the verdict and considering her options. Slink founder Kirshner lied to investors about the company's business performance and used the money raised to buy himself a $16 million private jet, among other abuses, according to the complaint with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. When an investor dug deep into Slink's finances, Kirshner told him that Slink was in the process of transitioning to a new financial service provider, the complaint said, and the investor sent $35 million. A Slink spokesman said the company has appointed a new CEO, is cooperating with government investigations, and looks forward to a just resolution of this matter. Crypto exchange FTX has raised nearly $2 billion from top investors, including Sequoia Capital, Lightspeed Venture Partners, and Thoma Bravo, giving it a valuation of $32 billion. But the company was so poorly managed that it did not even have a complete list of the people who worked there, according to a report issued by the company's new management this month. Bankman-Fried told reporters at one point that FTX's sister hedge fund, Alameda Research, was running out of control, and that his team had since found $50 million in assets they had lost track of. That's life, he wrote. This is from Akulisto Portugali. I've translated this for you from a Greek article. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.